Hi, today we're speaking with Jonathan Portiz from CSU-Pueblo. Dr. Portiz is an associate professor of mathematics and director of the Center for Teaching and Learning at Colorado State University, Pueblo. He's written 2 OER math books, textbooks, and serves on the OER State Council. In his spare time, he also teaches a Creative Commons certificate course. Today, Jonathan is going to share information about OER with us and also about how you can get involved with OER at CSU Pueblo.
Thank you so much for being here with us today, Jonathan. We're going to dive right into the questions. Can you give us a nutshell idea of what is OER?
What's a delight to be here with you. Thank you very much. So OER, OER stands for Open Educational Resources. So I like to think of educational resources are things you use for teaching. And we're not going to include everything, not the classroom space maybe you're in or the oxygen you're breathing when you're teaching, but we're talking about basically things that can be copyrighted. So like textbooks and test banks and quizzes and software and all those things are educational resources. And the word open means that you can get to it for free. But the word free in the context of educational resources means not just free, it doesn't cost you anything, but it means free also they are open to be modified. And so it's unlike a traditional textbook, which they're wonderful high quality textbooks that come from publishers, but they are, they come as is and you can't change them and you can't make them fit your particular class. You can't make them fit the particular situation that students are most interested in. Open educational resources are free to be modified and free to be adapted to make the best possible class. So they're cheap and flexible in ways that are beneficial to our students and our faculty.
Great. Building on that, what are some of the benefits that you see of OER versus other online resources like ebooks?
So that's a good point. So in the crisis we're having, I'm switching quickly to education during the COVID pandemic. A lot of people go home and they don't maybe have books that they share with a couple of people on their hall and dormitory, or they loan to each other for a few days. So having ebooks is already a big step forward. It helps people to just get it all on their phone or on their home computer. So that's a great thing in crisis times and all times. But the nice thing about OER is that they are, you can copy them as much as you want. So the students don't have to worry about, unlike another resource, you can loan them to students. Students can get access to them without worrying about access controls or fees, and they can keep that access for as long as they want. So if you take a really great class and suddenly, when I've had students who take a math class from me and say, well, maybe I want to be a math major after all. And if they're just renting their textbook or they're using an ebook that they only have a 1 semester access to, then at the end of that semester, they lose the textbook. If they want to refer to it in the future, then if it's an OER, it's electronic usually, and they can keep that access for as long as they want. So that's a wonderful thing. There's also great equity things about OER, so as opposed to ebooks. So we have, the library gets us some wonderful resources that are really unique and very valuable, but the thing is they come because a person is a student at CSU Pueblo. If a student transfers to another institution, they may not have exactly the same resources. Students in other countries may not have the same access to resources. So open educational resources are electronic resources where the access is the same and available for anyone at any time, anywhere on the globe. So that's a pretty nice feature.
And could you touch a little bit on how the open part of OER allows students to engage with the resource in ways they might not be able to otherwise?
So that's a really good point. So we sometimes say in the OER world, come for the price, stay for the quality. So it's a wonderful thing to have a textbook that costs nothing. I mean, the CSU Pueblo admissions webpage recommends that students budget $1,800 a year for their textbook. So dropping the cost down to zero is certainly a significant benefit. But the other thing is the quality. They are so customizable, and the students. So, for example, I can take a textbook. I've written a statistics textbook that I use in my classes, and OER can be used at other places. If I happen to use examples in my textbook which are very alien to my students, I can change all the examples to make them relevant to the local community. Another thing I did with OER once when I sort of really got started in this area was I had students creating their own textbooks. So we all had, so there's this program called MediaWiki, which is what makes the famous Wikipedia work. And so I made a little MediaWiki, and students wasn't part of Wikipedia. It was just a special thing for my own class, and students would, every week a student would be, as a pair of students was assigned to take really good notes and to write up what they learned that week. And so we built a sort of class collaborative textbook. And so the things that the students cared the most about, things that they contributed, were there in the textbook. So there are all of these aspects of education. Some people sometimes call it open pedagogy or open educational pedagogy or open enabled pedagogy. There are things that we can do because we don't have the barriers of closed textbooks. And they allow much more flexible and student-driven resources available for classes. So that's those are some of the ways that we use open in OER.
It's fantastic. It's really interesting to think about students as creators and not just consumers of the educational resources they're using, right? So we've touched on equity, we've touched on cost, we've been touched on ownership of the materials. What are some other ways you can think of that OER supports students, not just at CSU-Pueblo, but across the country?
Well, I think we shouldn't downplay the equity and the cost issues. So those are issues it's worth not to just sort of checking a box. And so, for example, there's a great study that's been done, a series of studies that have been done by a sociologist at Temple University about the actual lived experiences of students around the country. And it's called the Real College Survey. And her name is Sarah Goldrick-Robb, and she's collected amazing data. And it's really, because of the economic circumstances we are in, actually this is before the pandemic. I think things have only gotten much more difficult for our students. But before the pandemic, the surveys indicate that nationwide, the students, so 17% of students have experienced homelessness at some point in the last year, students in higher education in the United States. And around 50% have experienced either food insecurity recently within the last month, and maybe housing insecurity in the last year. So, and those are the national numbers. It's very interesting. CSU-Pueblo participated in the data collection for this project, and we were one of the campuses. So we have the numbers exactly for our own campus, our own student body. And we actually are very reflective of the national averages. So I like to say to my colleagues, if you're teaching a class with 100 students in it, approximately 17 of the students in your class have been homeless at some point in the last year. And to a homeless student, I've taught out of some wonderful textbooks, calculus textbooks I've taught out of, which are these huge fat textbooks that have, wonderful books, but they cost maybe $300. It's not unheard of to have a $350 science or math book. And to a student who's been homeless at some point in the last year, the idea of spending $300 on a textbook just seems appalling. And I think that for faculty and administrators and those of us who have been out of education for a while, we have a vague recollection that, oh yeah, textbooks cost a lot when I was a student. And we think, yeah, everything's gone up. They could probably cost more now than they did when I was a student. But the interesting thing is that the rate of inflation has made all prices go up. The rate of cost of textbooks is 3 times the rate of inflation, higher than really any other commodity today. It's a really sort of weird thing if you look at these graphs of different commodities. So it's not a small thing. We are imposing something on our students, a barrier to students. The cost barrier is just enormous. And so I really like to say to my colleagues, maybe it's a great book, but is it such a great book that you want a student who has potentially been homeless recently to spend $350 on it? I realize it's a great book. Could you maybe, by excellence of your own teaching, overcome some defects you see in the free book? And I think there are some excellent free books as well. So anyway, that's one of the things. I think we shouldn't downplay the cost. We also shouldn't downplay equity. There have been interesting studies about open educational resources used around the country. And one of when courses switch from using commercial textbooks to open educational resources, every student tends to see a slight academic bump up in their success rate, in their performance in classes. But the interesting thing is that bump up tends to be much larger for students from traditionally underrepresented groups, financially disadvantaged or self-identified minority students. So we are achieving, some of the goals of equity in education. We want education more equitable, and this one factor of switching over to OER can make a significant. It helps everyone, and it helps even more those students who are most in need of compensation for the traditional difficulties that their communities have suffered. So I think those are really valuable things. As an academic, I like OER because I like to talk about my academic freedom. Academic freedom is this wonderful thing that we have in academia. It's sort of a weird thing. The history of it is actually kind of interesting. I wrote a book that has some sections about the history of academic freedom. But we are respected as experts, at least that's the idea. We are all in academia, and that's why I'm a teacher. I have some knowledge I want to share with people. And I have the right to control where my research goes. That's academic freedom for research. And I have the right to control what happens in my classroom. And my chair cannot come in and say, you're not teaching math the right. I mean, they can give me some basic feedback on, I can't be a buffoon, but I have to, but I'm presumed to have expertise to teach my subject. And if you think about it for a minute, what's the difference between my chair coming into my classroom and telling me, I don't think you should do that subject. You finished unit 1, what you're planning to do for unit 2 is not the right thing. You should do a different thing for the next unit of your class. Come on, I have academic freedom in the classroom. The next thing I think that makes sense logically in my way of thinking about this material is unit 2. That kind of control that I would be outraged if my chair tried to exercise that control in my classroom. That's exactly what textbooks do, commercial textbooks. If it's an OER, it's under one of these free licenses, open licenses. I would take it. I could move the order of units 2 and 3 and put them in the order I prefer. If it's a copyrighted textbook, it is the way it is, and I have no control over it. So I think it's weird for us to think that as academics that we see that much control over our classroom, over our pedagogy. That the test banks are nice. Who doesn't want someone to help you do your work, But it's a ceding of so much control over the way I teach my class that I really like the power that OER gives me to really give a class that I want to give and that I think is more useful to my students.
So the benefit isn't by any means just for students. It's for the faculty members who get to exercise their academic freedoms, demonstrate their expertise, and really personalize what it is that they're teaching. But you're also not putting your students in a situation where potentially they're trying to figure out whether they can buy their textbook or buy groceries.
That's exactly right. It gives us all a benefit, and I don't know. I thought well, you said it very well. I agree with you. The academic freedom is a very nice thing, and I don't know why we give it up. It seems like it's a lot of extra work to exercise that kind of control. But there are wonderful OER that exist now, and because they have these open licenses, I could go out and I could say, hey, there's a great book on statistics. I like every other chapter in it. There's another great book I like it. I could put them together, and that could be the new textbook, which is a flexibility I have because I have that kind of control over open educational resources.
Well, I'm sold. How would folks go about getting more involved with OER here at CSU-Pueblo?
So we have a committee on the campus of representatives of all the different colleges and different units. It's chaired by the library, Rhonda Gonzalez, and there's several. It's called. So I think we have a web page. It's csu-pueblo.edu/open education. I think is the URL. I'm not sure if there's a hyphen in the middle of that or not. And there's an email address, oer@csu-pueblo.edu. And so certainly inquiries to both of those ways. Talking to people on the committee or going to our webpage or sending an email to the email address. We're happy to support you. We have a little bit of state funding. The state of Colorado has been supporting this, as was mentioned at the beginning. I've been serving on the state council. We have a little bit of funding from the state government, and we can support faculty both technically. There's some amazing expertise in the library that can help us. There's amazing expertise in instructional design, how you can integrate some OER into a new way of delivering your curriculum. And we have this financial support as well from the state. We're happy to give mini grants, and we have purchased a software platform that makes the creation and editing and the recombination that's allowed by OER. This platform enables that to be done quite easily. So we have a lot of things that we can help you with if you just come and contact us.
Fantastic. So we have some funding, we have the resources. We'll be sharing all of the links and contact information in the blog post here. And clearly we have very passionate, knowledgeable people here on the campus that you can reach out to for support. Thank you so much for talking about this very important topic with us, Jonathan.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.